Stephen Carson, coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri, in these United States. Black Horse and I already started a bit of a survey of the economic situation in Europe, and Black Horse will be back to continue some focus on the continent, but we're going to pop across the English Channel to the United Kingdom today with the help of Dissident Nomad. I'll bring him on in just a moment. This show is gratefully supported, so I can pay the graphic designer who does those great thumbnails and various other bills. Gratefully supported through Subscribestar. Almost all the subscribers, except a handful of extremely generous individuals, give $5 a month. So not that expensive, I hope. And with that, I think that's all I'm going to do. Okay, so let's bring on Dissident Nomad. Hello, sir.
Hi, Radlib. Hi, good to be here.
Yes,
good to be back on the show. Yeah,
it's a bit cold here. You're enjoying the winter coming on here. Well, it's not the winter technically; it's the fall, right?
Is it? Well, it's almost December. It feels like winter. So I mean, that's I think that's the main thing. Yeah, we got single-digit temperatures. It was snowing in London in the morning, actually, snowing frost. So that's normally the sign that the rugged, rough weather is upon us. So
we're having our first full winter with more of a loaded pasture. In the past, we just had a pony, and now we have a pony and 2 horses. One that is ours, and one that is a guest, a renter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so there's the issue of getting water to them. The horse bucket or trough or whatever you call it for the water is heated, so that's no problem. If we can get water into it, it won't freeze when we're below zero or below freezing. But the problem is getting water to it, because our very, very long hose that goes out to the pasture freezes up, and curling it up and bringing it out every day is not something I'm looking forward to. So they don't have heated hoses, I suppose. Anyway, so that'll be interesting this winter. Okay, well, we're going to get right to it. And our guest made a really neat suggestion for how to start. And I'm going to have to do something a little hokey here with the sound. So excuse me. And I'm going to have to, in fact, let's see. You better mute, Nomad, while I do it, because otherwise I think your audio comes through the stream twice. Okay, so this is a fellow named Wandering Turnip. Sheer coincidence that it sounds like, makes us think of Brian Turnipseed, Anyway,
no relation.
Yeah. This is Wandering Turnip, and he goes around looking at various towns in England and so forth. Here's a visit to Bolton, and I thought that Nomad suggested, and I thought that there's about 2.5 minutes that I thought would kick us off with some visuals. So sorry, the audio is going to be a little weird. I'm literally playing it from my horrible Mac speakers and just picking it up with the mic. So we'll see how this goes. Oh, I just realized there is something I can do to help a little. I'm going to jack up the input on the mic a bit, and hopefully it doesn't make it terrible. Okay, let's try this.
So far, so good. I know there's a lot of boarded up stuff and shut down stuff, but so far it still seems busy. Let's get to the market. Let's have a look at the market. See what's going on there. Couple more shut there. I thought Primark had shut down, but apparently it's not. It's just you've got to access it from another way. Normally it's not good when you got this on the windows. You see anything? So I said all that about it not being too bad, and then I have just come across an area that is pretty bad. A big corner boarded up thing here. This probably would have been a pub or a bar. Yeah, you've got your posters on the wall, probably for something. Oh, shit. Then across the way there, something shut. 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 So yeah, you've got that entire row there, all closed. And then coming here, closed. Look at all these closed. Across the way as well. Closed. Boarded up. Shut. Another massive one there, shut. Another row there. All closed. Some of them might open later, but I don't know. And a pub, what do we reckon? Sound. So that pub there, I know all that stuff's closed, but it does say that pub's opening at 3. So that's good to know. And check this out, a chimney in the distance.
Now he gets very excited about a chimney. So I'm going to skip that and skip forward to one more short bit. Here we go.
Good stuff.
Oh, and over here, boarded up stuff. What's this? So that there, boarded up, but it says it's going to be turned into brand new luxury apartment. A one bed from 175,000 to 285,000 for a one bed. Great, affordable housing for us all. Another little chimney there as well.
Okay. Excuse me to switch back to my audio. Oh, and I will, I want to share the link to this in case you found this interesting. It will be in the live chat. Okay. Yeah, so, yeah, thanks again for recommending that. Did I bring it down? Wait, what happened? Oh. Okay, yeah.
It's there.
Yeah, it's there. Okay, yeah, anyway. So hopefully everybody was able to see that. Mostly it was the visuals, so if you weren't able to catch the audio very well, there was only one bit that I thought was important in terms of a detail of what he said, which is right at the end, he saw that they were going to put some apartments in, and he said a one bed from 175,000 pounds. Now, that sounds like a lot to me. Nomad, I don't know how it strikes you.
Yeah, that actually is quite surprising for that area. Yeah, we're going to get into housing later on because the housing market forms a big part of the broader economic picture for the UK. But yeah, that looks pretty expensive. Actually, I think I was just on another tab as that bit came up. But that's a city called Bolton. It's about 22 kilometres from Manchester, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of before, of course, where the Industrial Revolution started. So, I mean, Wandering Turnip's great. He does that up and down the country. And that is by no means like untypical, if you like, of the UK. I mean, he's been to so many locations which are just like that. Lots of derelict buildings, lots of businesses that have shut down, mainly because of the pandemic, lots of boarded up properties. And it even goes into London. Actually, it's actually a similar situation. So yeah, Wandering Turnip definitely gives a good frame of reference for our stream today because there's a lot to get into. There's a lot to unpack and wade through. So
yeah, I just wanted to give my own reaction to that video,
sure.
Which is that all the shuttered businesses, the graffiti on the the boarded up, the boards that were boarding up places. From a certain point of view, maybe not in total detail, but sort of squinting a bit, it all felt very familiar to me from
Yeah.
the
The Midwest.
downtown St. Louis, which is I don't know how much you know about what's happened with the. I mean, you probably heard about Detroit, but
Yeah.
what you may or may not know is that a lot of American cities have huge sections that we would call, blighted, right? Where what was once some thriving area has a lot
Sure.
of boarded up stuff, and if there are any shops, you know, they're not what do you guys call them? High street, right? They're there's some Chinese takeout place or something,
Yeah.
and a place to get your nails done or something, things like this. Very distant from the heyday of these places.
Yeah.
We've got tons of areas like that in downtown St. Louis. So the reaction I was having watching that video was, wait a second, I thought that was like these American ghetto areas in American cities. I didn't think I'd see that in England, because whenever I visited England, it seems like, well, to me, rather packed for one thing, and kind of everything's being used because there's a lot of people in a small amount of space relative to what I'm used to in the Midwest, right?
Sure.
And so I found the video shocking, is what I'm telling you. And you're saying that little section that we saw there, he's got tons of footage like that, you're saying, from all over England, right?
Very typical. I mean, what you're describing is basically the same as the UK. I did an article for Praxarchy last year. It was called Fear and Loathing in London. And I talk about that exact same thing. I call it, Radley, the economy of poverty, basically. Cheap takeout, fast food places, halal fried chicken in the UK, we'd say.
Right.
Brokers, betting shops, that's quite big in the UK. Vaping shops.
Yeah, we've got that now. Yeah.
It's just, it's horrendous. And you talk about the heyday. I mean, obviously, respectfully, you're a Gen Xer, I'm an early millennial. I can say the same thing. I'm not sure when the heyday was, if you're born in the early 80s like me, but it's definitely changed a lot. And it's, it is, as I say, it's the economy of poverty or government-run buildings. That's another bad sign in the UK, or just properties that are left derelict. Now, that said, it's a bit different in London where I am, but the same symptoms are around. You might get an American fast food store or a big conglomerate, that's probably got the backing of a BlackRock or a State Street or Vanguard if you go back far enough in their their chain of command. But it's funny how this is echoing throughout the developed world, and it's very concerning. I don't want to sort of go on a tangent, sorry, because I know that I was in Asia before, but didn't see this in Singapore or Korea. I didn't even see this in Malaysia, which is like second world.
You did not see scenes like that.
Did not
sort of.
No.
Do you have a better term? We'll say blighted sometimes. What term would you use for just an area that is just dead like that?
I mean, actually, just we could say, it's just kind of like a dead area, really, or just deprived or just run down.
Captain Smith in the comments says the death of the high street has been a long-running trend, but really accelerated recently, unsurprisingly. That's a lot of syllables, but death of the high street sounds like a good way to describe what we were just saying. Okay, so having done some video to give us a visceral reaction, let's try to get analytical and understand what in the heck is going on here. What Dissident Nomad has been working on, and this is a work in progress here. We've got one article that he has published on his Substack. I already shared the link, but I'm going to share it to the live chat one more time. This is part one, and the article is called The UK Economy, Lots of Problems, Few Solutions. We also have a sneak preview of part two, which is more of in a rough draft state. But there's still some stuff in there I think we'd like to hit today. That's not published, but coming soon, right, Nomad? When you've got a chance to polish it up.
Yeah.
So that's the plan today. We're basically going to go through the two parts of this article where Dissident Nomad is taking a pretty broad survey, looking at a lot of different ways of thinking about the UK economy. And just for those who are dropping in for this one, I want to mention that this is part of something that Black Horse and I started. We want to understand what's going on in Europe economically. I did mention that, yeah. And so this is a chance to focus on the UK because Nomad was already working on it. But we will look at the continent for those who are interested in upcoming shows. All right, so let's get to it. I've done lots of highlighting to help us go along here. So how about I start leading us and then you jump in?
Sure.
Okay, so number one, got to drop the mention here. You start out by mentioning the 2008 global financial crisis. Black Horse and I did a series on that, which has its own playlist on my channel. If you are so young that you don't really know what happened in 2007, 2008, remember, Nomad, we do have some young people in our audience. Yeah, then you might watch that series to kind of grasp a bit of what went on. It is U.S. focused, but as Nomad highlights here, certainly that had effects outside of the U.S. In fact, I think you're arguing here that it had pretty tremendous effects on the UK that are ongoing. So anyway, I might try to drop a link to that playlist if I get a chance. But anyway, so you start out by saying the UK was badly hit during the 2008 global financial crisis and has not recovered since. And you're going to prove that a bit later. We'll give some evidence for that later, showing that some things really flatlined, right? Some trends that were maybe not dramatic, but gently improving have just really flatlined. We'll see that later. Part of the story of the 2008 crisis is, as we highlighted in our series on it, is not just what happened, but the response to it, right? And that has itself had long-running effects. So as you mentioned here, there were massive bailouts of the bank. And one of the long-running effects of that has been increased borrowing from the government and rising deficits. We'll see more about the debt situation later. Since the 2008 crisis, the debt to GDP ratio of the country has grown. Brexit. We're going to resist the temptation to do a deep dive on Brexit because that's not our topic today. But it should be mentioned that various people have various ideas of what the effect economically would be. But now we've got a couple years, we get a chance to actually just look at reality. And so Nomad writes, Brexit has not gone according to plan with both exports and investments declining since leaving the European Union. And then there was the lockdowns and then a sort of readjustment as the lockdowns ended. We've covered that in detail on this channel. So there was a sort of a post-COVID boom, but that didn't last very long because Russia invaded Ukraine. And there were some problems. Now, I didn't highlight this, but I was sort of thrown because I remember, Liz Truss being the rubber band PM, right? Rubber banding in and rubber banding right back out before you even got used to the idea that she was the prime minister. And you're saying that actually had an economic impact. This is sort of new to me. Why was that such a big deal? I mean, who cares that she was there for 45 days?
Right. So, Liz Truss is our, shortest serving prime minister in a long time. I'm not sure if it's ever, but it was 45 days of pure chaos and, bedlam. Basically, she released what's called a mini budget, and she planned loads of tax cuts and increased spending. But the problem is, with interest rates so high, it would have left us vulnerable. The markets overnight went into a tailspin. The pound dropped to record lows against the dollar. I think it's like $1 and 0.003 or something like that. And eventually they had to, they did a vote of no confidence, and she was ousted. Before that, the Bank of England, Radlib, has to step in, and it has to buy up surplus sterling bonds. We call them gilts, to the tune of £65 billion. Now that's on the back of the recession brought about by the COVID lockdown and the response to that, which required a lot of deficits to be run, and then obviously the Russia-Ukraine thing. So we had almost like a round three when Liz Truss and Kwarteng, Chancellor, were in office, and the Bank of England, had to remove bonds off the surplus bonds off the market to the tune of £65 billion. So we've got all that inflation to contend with as well. But had they not done that, the crisis could have escalated. We'll talk about borrowing as we get in, but the problem is, one of the underlying problems is that interest rates are very high at the moment. That makes servicing the debt very expensive and borrowing money very expensive as well. Now, the US had its own issue with bonds recently. I think you covered that with Black Horse and Mad Merc a couple of weeks ago on that excellent stream you did, to Off the Cliff and things like that. Well, we've had problems as well. And, that's basically the background, the long and short of Liz Truss when, she was in office. So she was removed, really, I guess, at the behest of the markets that wield a lot of power. The City of London obviously dominates the UK. And, that's sort of how that unfolded.
So moving on, the response to the 2008 global economic crisis ushered in a period of low interest rates and cheap credit. This led to increased borrowing by households and the government, a booming bond market, and large asset levels forming.
Radlib, you're roboting. I don't know if it's the same.
Really?
You're kind of roboting a bit. How is it in the chat?
What's going on?
Yeah, it says, the chat has picked it up.
Okay, sorry, folks. Let me take a sec to. Oops, that's not what I want.
Chat, can you hear Nomad? Can you hear me? Because I can monologue if you want.
Give me just a sec. I'm just checking my speed.
Okay, I'm okay. Should I just carry on, Radlib, with an intro?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, but it's still a bit fuzzy and it's still a bit roboty. It's your mic, they're saying in the chat.
Okay. I'll try to turn it on and off again thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, when I set out to write these articles, I knew the UK was struggling, but I had no idea like the depth and the scale of the problems that the UK has with its economy. It's actually really quite staggering. It really is, quite bad. How are you doing, Radlib?
Okay, how does that sound?
Oh, perfect. He's back.
Okay, I unplugged the mic and plugged it back in. Good suggestions from the chat.
The old trick.
What I wanted to highlight here,
Sure.
You're going to get into it, but foreshadowing here when you talk about the response to the crisis, ushering in a period of low interest rates and cheap credit and increased borrowing. Okay, well, what's the problem with people borrowing a lot of money? What's the trap? When people borrow a lot of money in a low interest rate environment, and that's when the interest rate stops being low, right?
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that, but I just wanted
You
to
nailed
mention
it.
that as a bit of foreshadowing. Okay, now tell me this chart. Part of this is a debt chart, and it's I think shocking because hard to see the scale. Oh, sorry. Let me do my trick here. Let's pop this off into a pad. There we go. Make it big for the people. All right. Now, if you can see the scale on the left, you've got in the 90s, say, the debts in the 200 to 400 thousand, no, 200 million, 200 to 400 million pound range, I'm guessing, right?
No, billions. That's billions.
billions. Sorry, 200 to 400 billion. Yeah. Oh, the numbers that these people operate on. And so when we see those bars going up, this is not like 5 or 10% higher. We're talking like a near order of magnitude increase, on the order of an order of magnitude increase from the early 90s to the kind of debt level that we're at now. So this is a massive increase, right? But what is the red versus blue bars? Does that mean anything? Maybe the blue bars are just tentative numbers. We don't have solid numbers on that period yet.
No, it might be. It could be forecasted, and this could be.
That's what I meant. Yeah, it might be forecasted and not in the bag. Anyway,
I mean, we're at £2.5 trillion of government debt. 2.5, round about 2.5 trillion. We were over the 100% debt to GDP ratio earlier in the year. Now we're a little bit under. We're at like 97%. Yippee! We're really that's great progress. But yeah, this is pretty serious. Now, obviously, in the aftermath of 2008, credit was cheap, interest rates were low. I'm not sure if they were almost zero, like your once great country, but they were pretty low. So that's okay. But the problem is that fueled, obviously, a credit boom. So you've got, increased borrowing by consumers and the government. The bond market is booming because the interest rate is low. And, obviously that leads to large asset bubbles forming. But the problem is now in a high interest rate environment, these problems are really causing chaos throughout the country for the government, for industry, for the public sector. We'll get into that towards the end.
You've got some good charts on that, so let's come back to that.
Yeah.
Now, next you focus on low growth. Most recently, in particular, you say there's been about we're heading towards 2 years with growth below 1%. Now,
very serious.
Anyone who's paid attention to economic growth type stuff knows that developing economies are able to have quite remarkable percentages year after year. When an economy is sort of catching up, right? Like China during a certain period after Deng Xiaoping and some other Asian tigers you're probably familiar with, right? Who at least at a certain period could have 5% growth, 8, 10% year after year after year for a period, right? But then it kind of settles down, and as you get to a mature, developed economy, I don't know, Nomad, do you have a feel for these things? Like 3% would be good for like a U.S. or a British economy or something like that.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I mean,
but we're seeing 0.1, right? 0.2, 0.5.
Yeah.
This is even for a developed, mature economy. This is not good, right?
No, it isn't, because effectively the debt interest repayments basically mean that you're in negative growth. But that's maybe a different argument for another time. Dan Tubb from Lotus Eaters, he often points that out. Because we've got such high interest rate repayments. But yeah, we're basically at if you're at 0.3, you're just above a recession, because if you go below the 0% line, you're in a recession. But it's been
according to the definition of recession before they changed it recently. Yes,
like inflation, they always change it.
Right. So as you write, the GDP of the UK has hardly grown at all since 2019, and in those 4 years, we have witnessed nothing but economic stagnation. We've seen increased housing, energy, and food costs. Now, coming to inflation. Britain's cost of living crisis is the worst in half a century. And this, I did not know this part. Here, let's just go to the chart. I'll
Sure.
get it off in a window here. This period here from 2022, mid 2022 through mid 2023, there's about a year where it hits double-digit inflation. And this is not some kind of like Austrian measure of inflation. This is actually the official government stats, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know that the reality is worse. They're going to understate it, not overstate inflation.
Exactly. Yeah, because the actual, sometimes they call it real inflation, or it's always worse. I mean, for us, food
Shadow
inflation went up to like 13%. I mean, it's
right.
There's you've seen that meme of the US basketball players. There's a short one, and it's like government inflation. Then they've got the tall guy, the point guard, and it's like real inflation, the difference. But yeah, it's I mean, recently it's come down. It has come down, but those months there from July 2022 right through to March 2023, it's basically double digits all the way.
That shocked me. That shocked me.
And it's
really bad.
It is as measured by the CPI. But to be honest, Radlib, if I could monologue a little bit, as most Brits will tell you, we had a cost of living crisis before Russia, Ukraine. To be honest, we've had one for a long time now. If you want to zoom out, I don't even want to.
I'm sorry. This is one of the lines I highlighted because this has been a long-running theme that Black Horse has really been great at bringing out, which is that things will be blamed on the current thing. Hey, there was a war in Russia, and that's why such and such is happening. And we love to show the long-term context and go, actually, it was already going on, and whatever crisis of the moment might have made it worse, but it was a trend that was already happening. And what you say in your article here is the war between Russia and Ukraine has led to rising food and energy costs, but the truth is the UK had a cost of living crisis before the conflict started. And I don't know why it's so important to highlight this. Number one is it's just true, but maybe the second one is I see them hiding poor economic policies behind things like that, right? Hey, no, it's not our fault. It's the Ruskies or something. Well, that didn't make things better, but it's not really all the Ruskies. Okay, man, we're not buying that.
In September, I wrote a whole article about that. I called it Our Current Economic Malaise. I'm just going to drop it in the chat for everyone.
Please.
Sorry, guys. This is a different...
You may not be able to do that, but if you send it to me, I can put it in.
Okay, on StreamYards. Okay, yeah.
Sure.
Exactly, because they kind of got a double get out of jail free card. They've got COVID, which they blame on China. Then they got the invasion. They can blame on Russia, Ukraine. But really, I mean, even this goes back to, I don't know what you and Black Horse covered on that stream, but it basically goes back to 2008 and the response to 2008 and all the asset bubbles that built up during the response with zero interest rate policy, basically the QE programs, and also the dollar liquidity swap lines, which basically extended it to America's vassals, including the UK, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, Swiss National Bank, the ECB. And that's really the origins of the overall crisis. Now, obviously, Russia, Ukraine has made it worse. Excuse me. Sorry, obviously, COVID.
It's not this emphasis, right, Nomad, is not to minimize the impact of various geopolitical crises. It's just to say that you can't blame long-running trends on something that happened yesterday. Okay, that's just BS, right?
No.
Okay, so let's go back to your article. Here's the interest rate chart. Let me bring that up.
Good, important.
Okay, so we see the I'm going to have to shrink this a bit so we get the axis. Okay, so we see nearly zero, low interest rates leading up to the COVID thing, and then near zero during the COVID lockdowns and all that. And there is a method to the madness, to be fair. Why are they pushing interest rates so dramatically up?
Well, I mean, I guess they're pushing interest rates up to squeeze out inflation.
Right.
But the Bank of England has raised them, I think it's something like 13, 14 times since 20.
Yeah, you can see the stair steps in this chart, right? Each one of those is a rate increase. Yeah.
And they don't know when it's really going to come down below current levels. I mean, the Bank of England haven't entered into talks about that. They're saying it's sometime next year, but I mean, I'm a bit unclear on this because worldwide, a lot of people think the global cost of living, the economic problems are going to go on till the first half of next year at least. And obviously, there's always like a 3-month lag anyway. So, these problems are set to go on for a while, but at least we're not in that period of double-digit inflation, which is normally something you'd associate with developing countries, LDCs, less developed countries, Latin America, and so on and so forth. But
Zimbabwe and Venezuela and places like this. Right?
So it's
and then again, you make that same point again. The UK's cost of living crisis predates both COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah, absolutely.
And GDP has increased only marginally in the last 15 years. So
right, exactly.
When something's been going on for 15 years, you can't blame it on something that just happened in the last several years, right?
Yeah, okay. So
it doesn't work.
Exactly. A few words on that. The left and the right are unanimous in this. We British workers haven't had a real wage rise in 15 years. We've had a decade and a half of wage stagnation. And even the left-leaning Guardian say that British workers are something like, I think it's like £11,000 per year worse off. Meanwhile, across the G7, I think the average salary's gone up by about 8% or 8.8%. But, both, wages have stagnated. GDP has effectively stagnated in the same period of time, Radlib, from 2007 to now. The CPI has gone up by like 47%. It's crazy. Yeah. So, I mean, British.
I meant to highlight that 47%. What you've done there, and I think this is excellent.
I was looking for that.
we tend to talk about these year-to-year figures, and that's fine. But I think this gives us really important context by you stepping back and saying, okay, a little bit here, a little bit there. You add it up over 15 years, and that's a 45.7% CPI increase. So it does accumulate, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, actually, I've got the structure a bit wrong because I've put wages lower down the article. I should probably bring that up. But it does make a difference because, in all honesty, Radlib, when I zoom out, I thought, if I'm being absolutely honest with my own biases, before I sat down to write this article, prepare for our stream, I thought it was mainly owing to immigration. But that's not really the case. It's not Brexit. It's not COVID-19. It's not Russia-Ukraine. It's not immigration. The main line in the sand is the 2008 crisis. That's when 2008 smashed the UK's growth machine. Because if you look at things before things were actually going kind of quite well. We had growth. Wages were rising. Obviously, borrowing wasn't as bad. But now we'll unpack that a bit later. But I mean, when you zoom out, it's really been a decade and a half of stagnation. And compared to our other G7 friends, they've seen wages rise a bit, but
Well, sorry about that. But
yeah.
if it's any comfort, we got to for a little period in the U.S. we got to have more diverse mortgages, more diverse people getting mortgages.
Yeah.
Sorry that it's tanked your economy, but you got to look at
right.
you got to look at the silver lining of these things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we can come to a one consensus about the origins of 2008, but I've just read.
Yeah, I'm joking. That's not exactly quite right. I recommend our series as well as Tom Wood's book, Meltdown, which he whipped right out after that crisis.
You know what's really funny? The 1971 guys. I'm kind of quite big in that sort of area as well. I know you are too. Now they say that Americans haven't had a real wage rise since 71 or the early mid 70s. So how far back do you want to go? Now, I just want to say one little thing. I don't want to zoom out too much, but the UK was kind of battling recessions in the 90s as well. I don't think they were this serious, but we picked ourselves back up. But then 2008 came along, and really, if I'd blame anyone, I suppose it would have to be the banks and then the government for their policy. But that's that's a good frame of reference. The CPI index always very handy. And I just thought, we'll do debt later, won't we? Yeah. So we're going to get into the micro problems now: investment, the skills gap, productivity.
Yeah, but just one last point from this previous section. You wrote British households have accounted for the shortfall created by rising interest rates and high inflation by using their savings and by turning to credit cards. Now, you didn't put the evidence for that here.
No, I didn't. You're right.
Shrinking savings and increased personal credit card debt, but I believe you. So moving on to low investment. Oh, and since we mentioned it, and someone in the chat is hawking it, I have the right to put links. So WTF happened in 1971.com. If you've never looked at that site, please click that link right now, and you will be glad you did. It's grim entertainment, shall we say? Okay, low investment. Right. So a lot of evidence suggests that trading in financial assets absorbs a lot of the capital that would otherwise be set aside for investment. Now, I don't know if you know the terminology here to tell me if I'm using it wrong, but would it be wrong to call this financialization of the economy?
Absolutely, my good friend. Elementary, my dear Watson. That is absolutely on the market. Well, I'm going to close the year out. To be honest, Rally, I'm going to take a break after our stream. And then when I come back, I'm just going to be unpacking all of that. What has happened since 71, the financialization of the economy. You see, I was writing about immigration before, and the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, supposed to be the central bank of central banks, but really we know it's the Federal Reserve. But their data says, look, since this century's begun, all the growth, in inverted commas, has come from trading in financial assets, stocks, bonds, certificates of deposit, collateralized debt obligations, all these zombie financial products. The shadow banking system is 5 times, in terms of revenue, 5 times what actual goods and services are. Real goods and services don't account for anything, Radlib. That's the problem. But this study from the Bank for International Settlements says that, it's negatively correlated. So as growth in the finance economy, growth in financial assets goes up, the growth of the real economy actually goes down.
That's interesting. There's some kind of zero-sum game going on there instead of both sectors growing together, which I would expect that happened during, say, the 18th and 19th centuries in Britain, right? You probably had growing financial, city, right? The city of London and so forth. It was growing while the Industrial Revolution was going on and so forth, right? While Britain was being quite productive in making actual stuff, it was also becoming a powerhouse economically. But you're saying now instead of those growing together, one seems to grow at the expense of the other. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I learned this earlier today. I mean, private assets, financial assets have doubled since Tony Blair became the prime minister, which was in 1997. And really, I mean, the problem in my country, the problem in the UK is that for the last 3 decades, we have prioritized the City of London as opposed to actual industry. We have lost. Sorry, I've got these reading these off my notepad, and my handwriting is terrible. I mean, we have lost something like 7 million jobs in manufacturing since the 1990s. Sorry, yeah, here it is. 3 million jobs have fled the country since 97 in manufacturing. Even since 2008, manufacturing in the UK has gone down by a fifth. It's gone down by 20%. But the problem is we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And it's been like this since the Thatcher era, Radlib. And that's that in order to keep the City of London as, you know, the centre of finance in the world, in Europe, whatever, the pound has to be strong. But the problem is if the pound is too strong, our exports are too expensive, right? They can't compete with exports from, from other countries, especially now when you think of China and, Mexico and all these other, manufacturing hubs, mainly China, that have come along. So, we've always, Labour and Conservative PMs have always prioritised what's better for the City of London. And I think personally, as I was arguing in my last articles, that's why immigration is so high, because it boosts GDP and that's good for the markets.
They want to do line go up on certain lines.
Exactly.
Things that they focus on. Hey, I wanted to throw in a chat comment from Steve Pierce, who's been making a lot of good comments here. He says, I remember being offered a credit card at a Quick Fit for a 25% discount on a tire change. So it's we'll change your tire, and hey, we'll give you a discount if you take our credit card. And then he comments, over financialization of everything. So you could imagine a time where you go to get a service like a good or service like a new tire and having it popped on, and they don't try to bring you into their financial scheme. Right. But those days are long in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Steve's made some good points. Steve, we'll come back to your, he made a very good point, incisive point about a quarter of the UK's debt being tied to inflation. It's it's index linked to inflation. We'll bring that up later. Well done, Steve. That's
okay.
Great.
I'm going to try to, I want to keep us moving. So I'm going to try to hit some points from your article real quick. More points. So in your section on low investment, we talked about the financialization. And then this is an interesting picture. Let me get this up bigger here. Whoa, too big. Here we go. Total investment as percent of GDP as compared to some other major developed economies. No shocker, China and India, they're really still developing economies. I think it's fair to say. So they've got a lot of investment going on. But we would think the UK would be somewhat comparable to Germany, France, Canada, Sweden, but in fact, it's underneath all of these. And it's even kind of a bump under, not just under Germany, but kind of a bump down from Germany there. So it is at the Guardian states business investment is lower in the UK than in any other country in the G7, and 27th out of 30 OECD countries, ahead of only, who are the last 3 on that list? Poland, Luxembourg, and Greece. So, enjoy your dominance. Enjoy your dominance over those 3 countries. Luxembourg. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the main point is this is a very big structural problem in the UK, and we've got to start. You see, the problem is the British government is not serious about these problems. They're kind of in denial. British companies don't invest in capital, machinery, and equipment. They don't invest in R&D. They don't invest in reskilling or upskilling, training. They don't invest in human resources. Instead, really, Bradley, what they're doing is they're basically giving their profits to all their profits to the investors, and they're making money, in the capital markets and with investments.
Right.
And we're kind of really, I mean, we are kind of really struggling and suffering, because we're going to talk about 3 points: low investment, then we've got productivity and the skills gap,
Yeah.
and they all, it's a self-reinforcing cycle.
Well, let me read your words. I thought your words were really good here. You talk about a doom spiral on the low investment, a self-reinforcing feedback loop of low investment leading to poor productivity, resulting in low growth and declining living standards for all.
Exactly. That's
summed
basically
it up nicely.
Then you throw in inflation and high interest rates on top of that, and then you've got the perfect recipe for really this this complete train wreck of an economy, and how they've let it get to this level. I don't know, but it starts with this very just low rates of investment. Great, excellent.
Right. This chart is great because this is some of that flatlining I was talking about, where you see a trend that was going on, and then now this doesn't go all the way back to 2008. You're seeing investment leading up to about 2016, but then we see that instead of continuing up, it flatlines, and then after COVID, it really dive bombs, right, and has not recovered even back to the flat line that was happening from 2016 to 2019.
No.
So this is a grim chart, man.
It is. I mean,
and this would be. Sorry, this is private investment. You had a public investment chart, but this is the private investment chart, right? So,
this is a death knell for people like me who voted for Brexit. But basically, since then, I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's I missed the hinge of this change. It was Brexit.
For this one, it is, at least for private investment. I mean, actually, this is going to crop up a bit like, well, it's actually going to crop up a few times, really. All these problems do. That's why our situation is kind of quite complicated. But when we talk about the impact, the secondary impact on healthcare, schools, law enforcement, transportation infrastructure, will come back to investment. But I think you covered the main points.
A couple of things to highlight here. We've been very interested in this employment story. We did a whole show. The workers are few, I believe we titled it. Similarly, in the UK, you note that employment is still below pre-pandemic levels, with over 300,000 vacancies more than 2020. So we have seen, obviously, during the lockdowns, it was really crazy. And we have seen a swing back up, but not to where we were before. That's the important thing here, right? Unemployment.
Well, again, all of these problems are coming to head. Well, why have we got all these vacancies? Well, I mean, let's just go back a bit. Brexit has not helped for immigration, because immigration from the EU has declined, but immigration from non-EU countries, from outside the European Union, has soared, partly because non-EU migrants, they tend to bring a lot more dependence than their EU counterparts. And also there's a difference in skills. Like EU migrants tend to be more skilled in technical and vocational fields, whereas like those from outside of the EU, I think broadly speaking, a lot of them are just kind of laborers, manual labor and whatnot. So that's impacted us. But if you go back to before, well, why have we've got a skills gap? Because nobody is investing in training, in upskilling, in reskilling people as well. So all these things have kind of compounded, and now we've got this big structural problem where we've just got all these vacancies and
So quoting from your article, 20% of the workforce will be significantly underskilled by 2030. And 2/3 of large UK businesses said they struggle to recruit employees with the skills they need. Okay, moving on to low productivity. Again, we see one of these flatline kind of things, right? Where we had a trend going up until around Brexit time, and then it drops, and it doesn't go total flatline, but it does not get back to the pre-2007 trend. And there is of course, the drop during the lockdowns and then popping back up, but we're still way below. I mean, think about, the line doesn't continue on this graph, but try to picture in your mind where that would be, where that should be if it was going to be back on trend. It's
right,
really,
yeah.
I mean, it's not quite flatline, but it's not good.
All kinds of things going on with this graph. I mean, I think this is really the result of basically everything we've spoken about. Till now.
So how is labor productive? One of the big emphases that you get from George Reisman, Austrian economist George Reisman, is capital investment. How is labor more productive? It's because we have better tools to work with, to magnify the human effort and allow us to produce more with less time investment, right? That low investment means that you're not going to see that multiplication of human effort, right? That is, you're not going to get that productivity boost. So you're telling a low investment story, which leads to a sclerotic labor productivity story.
Exactly. A lack of skills. There's no growth. The government, as we'll come on to later, doesn't invest in things like infrastructure and things like that. I mean, it's a poor, it's a very sad state of affairs, because if you're not productive, that's going to impact growth. And again, it's a self-perpetuating vicious cycle that we can't seem to break. And again, sorry to repeat, but global events have exacerbated the problem, as has the high interest rate environment. The UK can't just borrow and spend its way out of these problems if they can't do that. So now here's
another one of those flatline. Here's another one of those flatline charts. This is real household income. You see a gentle trend up from 1980 to around 2006, 2007, and then pretty much flatline since then, right? So that's about 15 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, this is not shadow stats or something like that. This is Office for National Statistics. So this terrible story is trusting the government statistics, which we don't trust. So the story is probably worse than what that chart tells. Okay, what else? You mentioned there is an effect of mass immigration. It's almost certainly impacted wages, particularly for the lowest 25%.
Yeah, the lowest quartile has really been impacted. So I thought,
and then let's see, and then on debt, we've talked about that a bit, but this is worth highlighting because, again, let's go back to that thing we mentioned earlier. You do a lot of borrowing at low interest, and then the interest rate goes up, and now you start to have a significant problem. So here's now not a measure of the debt, but the interest payments on the debt, right? And the interest payments on the debt are going to vary by the interest rate, because I assume that there's government debt. I'm sorry, is this government debt? I should be careful here. Is this private?
Yeah, that's right. That's a national debt. Yeah, that's right.
National debt. Okay, that's what I thought. So this is government debt, and I guess government debt is not all at like a fixed interest rate or whatever, right? It's something that can
it isn't.
Well, and so you get a higher interest rate, and now the payments on the debt sort of separate in your mind the amount of debt itself, and now just think about servicing that debt from quarter to quarter, right? That servicing is just skyrocketing here.
It is now, because we're now. I mean, you look at that. Where's that? 2020, where it was still like 40, 50 billion. Then we've got the high interest rates. I think we're at 5%, 5.05%. And we're not sure when their interest rates are going to come down all that much. And now we're spending more on servicing the debt than we are on education, and our infrastructure
Yeah.
is crumbling. Our roads, our schools, our public buildings, our hospitals are all in need of major resurfacing. We can't do it because we can't borrow any more money, and we've already got 123 billion a year going out on just servicing the debt. And of course, when you've got that much money on debt, the government can't invest that in public services.
Right.
It's core
It's
core
more and more. It's
infrastructure.
just servicing debt. It's not
Yeah.
actually doing anything. It's
And
just servicing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. I mean, just going back to the real household income, the stagnant wages, you see, it's all a problem because that's less money circulating in the economy. That means wages are lower, revenues are lower. The government's tax revenues are going to be hit as well. And, it's just all part of it just really is very bad. We've had multiple rounds of QE, but I'm just wondering if the Liz Truss one is, kind of really sent us sort of over the precipice. I don't know, but this is kind of really concerning. But when I think, Radley, the full effect of all this will be seen when we break down healthcare, education, law enforcement. Then you'll see the real effect of.
Okay, so let's look at part two. Now, this is, like I said at the beginning of the show, part two of Dissident Nomad's article is not published yet. Yeah. It's in a draft form. We don't have lots of pretty graphs and so forth. So we'll probably move a little faster and be a little more brief here. But let's touch on some of the important points that he highlights here. So first of all, the housing crisis. House prices in Britain have increased by over 200% since the year 2000. Wait. 200%. That's a tripling. You're saying a tripling since 2000. That's insane. I mean, I wouldn't call it hyperinflation, but it's pretty bad.
We're in the wrong area. I mean, basically, just to repeat, wages have flatlined and houses have tripled. So there's different forces at work. There is there's a lot of foreign investment.
By the way, I see these things on these spats on Twitter where it'll be framed as a generational thing. Zoomers are saying, "Hey, I can't afford to move out of my parents' house and start a life and buy my own house," and the boomers are saying, "Hey, you just got to work harder." When I was young, I had owned a house by the time I was 22 or whatever. And the Zoomers are like, "No, the Zoomers are like, no, you don't understand. It's not like it was back then." Well, what we're seeing here is, I'm afraid to say, favors the Zoomers side of the argument, which is that this is just it makes it really believable that the current generation is not able to do what people were once able to do in terms of home ownership.
I mean, let's just piece all this together, because we started off in the first 10 minutes with the guy turnip seed in Bolton and the £170,000 one bedroom horrible apartment. As I said, we've done a lot of stats, but I mean, as I said, under Tony Blair, asset prices have increased exponentially. God, I've lost that again. So that's another thing. And all this is asset inflation. We've had a lot of investment from abroad. That's distorted the market. We've had various periods of, cheap credit, low interest rates. That fuels borrowing. That fuels asset bubbles. And basically, this is basically the result. There's just too many people in London, in England, in the UK, wherever you draw the line. I mean, actually, England has some of the highest population density in Europe. Period. But this is basically the result. And
so let's mention some of the factors that you highlight. Mass immigration obviously comes in. I was
Definitely.
suggesting, I don't know if you saw this, but I was suggesting on Twitter that here's a rough and ready definition of mass immigration. If you've got more people coming in than the rate of building new housing, you're clearly at the mass immigration level, right? Like you're not building enough houses to house all these people that are streaming in. Well, that's going to have an impact, right? Might be mass immigration below that level, but I would say if you're above that level, more people than houses are being added each year. Then you've got, or more families, however you want to, make it fair. Then you've got what I guess we would call mass immigration, right? So you highlight mass immigration, you highlight difficult planning laws. That means, hey, we'd like to build some housing here, but there's all these obstacles to doing it, right? And then asset bubbles formed as a result of the prolonged period of low interest rates after the 2008 crisis.
Oh, Radlib, we could do a whole stream on housing alone. I mean, we probably won't. We'll be lucky to even scratch the surface. I mean, a lot of these are like, have become, problems in their own right, but they all bounce off other problems, aggravate other things, and it's just we don't have enough social housing. We have too much temporary and short-term accommodation. We've got luxury apartments that are empty, but we don't have enough properties for actual, people to raise families. We have the smallest housing in Europe, in Western Europe. We've got the most expensive and also some of the lowest quality properties as well. It's just a completely, and all the while the government is subsidizing private landlords. It's a mess. It's just a complete mess.
Yeah,
and
there's a couple details in your article I wanted to call out. You say, we already said this, but cost of renting keeps going up. Buying is out of reach for many first-time buyers and young people, as we talked about, the unhoused Zoomers. House prices are approximately 9 times what earnings are. And I think you mean you're comparing like an annual salary to buying a house, right? That's
right.
Measure. Yeah. This shocked me because I remember my down payment for my house. The average housing deposit, we would call that a down payment in the US, but it's that initial sum that you do, right? Before you get into your mortgage payments. The average housing deposit is around £60,000. And as you point out, that is very difficult to compile that pot of money if you are renting.
Well,
to build
absolutely,
that up, right?
Because if you're renting, this is a problem. If you're renting, it's very difficult to save unless you're really, you're really earning a lot. So, and the problem is again the asset inflation. The market gets inflated, and then you've got like that room in Bolton for 170. I mean, really, one room. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's I have to go back and check that actually, because that sounds even
seems nuts.
For us.
So as you summarize, the UK has some of the highest prices, poorest quality, smallest housing in Western Europe. Now, mortgages. Now, this blew my mind. I'm used to 30-year fixed rate mortgage. You lock it in at a low interest. You wait till the interest rates are low. You lock it in, you get it for 20, 25, 30 years or whatever. You say short-term fixed rate mortgages. I didn't even know about these. Account for the highest percentage of mortgages in the UK. What is a short-term fixed rate mortgage? That means it is fixed rate for the first 2 years.
Yeah, that's right.
A nice low rate for the first 2 years. And then after 2 years, it starts climbing. Right?
Yeah, but the problem is that interest rates are high now. So
right. Let me give the numbers you say here. People are seeing their interest rates on their homes rise from 1 or 2% to possibly 7 or even 8%.
We don't know. This
is rough. This is rough. Okay, then let's see. Privatization has been much discussed. I'm not sure how much I want to go on about it today. Just to say that, for those of us who are like free market guys, privatization sounds great. Hey, get it out of the state's hands, give it into the efficient private sector. Well, the devil's in the details when it comes to privatization. Just look
exactly.
at
You can't
as the
You can't generalize.
Soviet Union unwound, right? To some degree, they would just hand it off to, the so-called oligarchs in the Soviet Union. Well, my understanding is we had similar sort of corrupt and not very good deals going on with the Thatcher privatizations and so forth, right? It did not necessarily result, in fact, in the major areas you highlight, it did not result in more efficient, more cheap service. It resulted in more expensive electricity. You say Britain has some of the highest electricity prices in the developed world. The rail network has been a catastrophe, higher prices, more delays. So it's gone in the opposite direction that we would expect as free market guys for privatization to lead. But again, you have to understand what happened, the details of the privatization. You can't just say, it was privatized, so it's better. You got to look into it, right?
Yeah, it's like, AA actually mentioned this earlier today when I sort of reached out to our broader community about privatization. I've got to be honest, it's the first time I've sort of covered this in a constructive way. It's not a blind spot, but I wasn't entirely comfortable sort of Bill O'Reilly doing it live. So I wanted to, get some more background. But it depends on the service. It depends on the utility. But really, although at the time it seemed like a good idea, because at the time we were embracing neoliberalism, Thatcher was basically piggybacking off of Reagan, although some of these went through in the late 70s. It really has not turned out very well. And of course, as some people, I think Steve or somebody else was mentioned, in the late 90s under Blair, we had the pioneering of the public-private partnership. So it would be kind of co-owned. And it's just, it just hasn't worked. It's just led to more bureaucracy, more confusion, and
it hasn't gotten what one might imagine, which is the magical effects of the market to increase quality of service while reducing cost, and that has not happened. Let's highlight a few more things. Britain's tax policies, the one that jumped out to me is that the UK's highest corporate tax rate, which is currently 25%, is just too high and makes the UK uncompetitive for corporations that are looking for a corporate home in Europe. Let's see, infrastructure. We went over some of this, but schools, hospitals, roads, public buildings are literally crumbling. If you hadn't heard about it, there was a Grenfell disaster in 2017. I don't know that much about it myself, where 72 people died in a fire that was largely the result of inadequate cladding and insulation materials. Someone in the chat says,
they mentioned it.
Barbarian from HeroQuest says, about 350,000 apartments in England still have flammable cladding, which will cost billions to remove. So that's what we call tech debt in my business. There's infrastructure debt, right? New infrastructure is difficult to build in the UK, mainly because of planning permission, onerous regulations, expensive labor and materials, poor transport links, lack of government funding. Let's see, education. The number that jumped out to me here is a record 40,000 teachers quit the profession in 2022. That's interesting. Would like to see a graph of that.
Yeah, we were hit by all kinds of public sector strikes. It's the same thing over and over. In a period of inflation, prices are going up. The public sector wants to price rise. Obviously, that's inflationary. The governments don't want to do it. It's the same thing in your great country in the 70s. That's why there were strikes everywhere. Inflation was up to 6%. The Nixon administration, didn't want to, they didn't want to entertain. It's the same thing here. I've got to be honest. Of all the parts that really shocked me, education was the one, Radley, because it was only 2 days ago I started that bit. That really, it probably is, along with healthcare, the biggest structural problem we have in the country. It's a big problem in America too, and the public schools, the state-funded schools are just failing on every metric you could imagine, and there's much more conflict between teachers and schools and parents. I think a lot of that may be cultural things from all these new people coming into the school system,
culture clash type stuff. Yeah, but sorry, there was one more detail you put in there I wanted to highlight. Many of Britain's schools have combined classes. What this means is you have classes with up to 60 students in one classroom. 60 students. I mean, I thought class size was big when I was in high school, and I always would have a book with me because the teacher would spend so much time getting kids to be quiet and breaking up conflicts and stuff that I would make sure I'd have something else to do because I'd just get bored while all this chaos was going on. Well, just imagine 60 students. I'm thinking back to a time when we had like 20 or 25 in the class.
I mean, this is crazy. This is inner city London. You know, like the British state-funded public school. I mean, sorry, there's a bit of a conflation there. I mean, US terms. We say state school, public school, because in the UK you say public school is sometimes a fee-paying one, but I mean state-funded schools. Radlib, they're a great microcosm for the decline of the country. I mean, you know, when you went to school and I went to school, the economics was simple. Every classroom had one teacher, homeroom teacher, whatever. Now it's crazy. You've got 2 assistant or 2 support teachers, the class teacher, then you've got special needs teachers, then you've got translators. There are some classrooms, Radlib, that have 5 or 6 adults. You've gone from 1 to 5 or 6. The economics, you know, the microeconomics of that, it's just crazy. Like
now, maybe this is just in the U.S., Nomad, but in the U.S. we have, shall we say, a large number of administrators pyramided on top of all those teachers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to manage the chaos. So they are actually part of the lunatics.
Part of the problem. Okay, well, let's keep rolling.
Lunatics on the asylum, as they say. But
it's
but
not
also, Radlib.
Oh, go ahead.
Did you catch the bit about watching lessons on YouTube? I mean, you know, you wouldn't expect this in second world developing countries, really, and it's desperate.
Okay, so I'm going to move quickly through some things. So the NHS costs a fortune, delivers relatively poor standard of care, lots of waiting, and so forth. I think we all know about the issues there. I'm not going to beat that to death. Poverty. Okay, so what's the bottom line effect of all this stuff we're talking about on people? There's a few here. So poverty, crime, we're just going to go through these real quick. Poverty, we're seeing more homelessness, more people at food banks, more people reliant on the government for support and welfare. This would have shocked me more, except Morgoth was sharing from his own experience some of this. Heat or eat. Heat or eat is a slogan to describe how Brits are increasingly being forced to choose between heating their homes in the cold months or filling their dinner plates. So this is not what we think of as like a first world problem, right? This is like a second or third world problem. Then on the crime, rising crime, this was an interesting stat. With only 1% of thefts and 3% of rapes ending with a conviction, these have become, quote, legal crimes using
decriminalized.
In other words, it's de facto decriminalization, right? It officially these are crimes, but in practice, people are doing them and almost 95% plus of the time getting away with it.
They get away.
It's a minor gamble. It's a minor gamble to do these crimes.
It's the same community in the UK as in the United States, as we always see on Twitter, that are getting away with all these decriminalized, incidents. It's like, there's been so much blurring of the lines in the justice system, where most crimes, they don't get punished because, as we'll come on to maybe very soon, there's a backlog in the justice system, and it really is a mess. I mean, actually, crime I haven't done that much of, but what's that? I mean, 850 incidents of violence and abuse per day in the UK in the retail sector alone.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I see some of this with my eyes in London. I mean, I'm going to go off. Actually, to be honest, I'm probably going to be at the Weave tomorrow in London with the
good.
gents, and I'll probably see a couple of the high serum testosterone, low impulse control, high melanin, low IQ group. Try to get on the bus for free, and all the they go in packs, and they the problem is, I mean, you kind of like, we tie our hands behind our own backs here, and we can't build prisons fast enough. But I think, sorry, Rad, if I just made the point with crime, poverty, education, infrastructure, the problem is we're broke. We don't have any. We need investment. We need the government to spend, but we can't do it. So bit by bit, the problem with the economy is if you don't get the economy right, the problems spread into other areas of life, don't they? And we're seeing this it play out in real time in the UK. So and I don't know. There's just it really is not really is a bad situation, and it's only going to get worse because this is a problem when the economy declines, whether it's Weimar Germany, whatever, Mexico and the Latin American debt crisis. We have rising debt. You have more poverty and whatnot. Society only goes one way, and this is a big issue, and so it's
okay. I think we've made it through your content. As far as you've got it right now, you have some more polishing to do, and we'll look forward to part 2 being published. And I'm just checking. I don't think we have any like super chat type stuff, but you had a comment that you wanted to. Do you remember what it was?
Well, it was.
We're interested to respond to or discuss.
Yeah, it was. The debt is quite complicated because another problem we have is a quarter of it is index linked. That means it's linked to inflation. So when inflation is high,
so let's slow this down. Let's slow this down. Yeah. So you're talking about government debt, right? Not private debt.
Government debt. 25% of it is actually
25% of it is directly tied to the interest rate. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or no, it's inflation. I'm sorry. Is it inflation linked? Okay.
Inflation linked. Inflation linked. Yeah.
Got it.
So when about 30 minutes ago, when we had the graph of the double digits between 2022 and March 23, well, that's impacting a large chunk of the debt, and it's just reason 142 why we're poor, because this is a problem in a high interest rate environment. Another problem with all this, Radlib, is that when interest rates are low, we should have addressed the problems with healthcare, infrastructure, crumbling, perforated, aerated concrete, but we didn't do that. And now these problems have sort of come to a head. And now if you go down, some of the notes, we've got some of the councils are now declaring bankruptcy. Birmingham is bankrupt. Yesterday, somebody shared one about Nottingham, which, formerly made famous by Robin Hood. But, that's going down. I don't know if we have municipal bonds in the same way the United States does. I'm not too sure about that. I'd have to check. But, the government's got to add that to the list as well. So it's and then, of course, the other problem I'd like to highlight, it's okay, we don't have any grass, but we're very geographically imbalanced. Like basically 45, 47% of GDP is what we call London and the southeast. And the rest of it is like a wandering turnip, Bolton, like all closed down, ordered up. Derek, you see America, you got your Chicagos, your Houstons, your New York Cities, you've got Sandy. You don't just have one. We have one. We have London.
We see some of these effects in that the area around Washington, D.C., which includes parts of Virginia and so forth. that larger area, the average income is well above the rest of the country, right? That proximity to power.
Right.
And
Yeah,
with London, you've got sort of a double whammy, right? It's proximity to power, so there's some political factors in play, I'm sure. I'm sorry, direct government. Wait, two factors. So one being that political factor, being close to power. The other, the financialization. So London is both the center of power. This is different than the United States, where we have New York and Washington, D.C., right? London is New York and Washington, D.C. in one city. It's the financial center and it's the political center. The increase in financialization, as well as the increase in the size of the state, means that more and more gets drawn to that black hole of London, so to speak. No offense, Londoners.
No pun intended. There are some analysts and researchers that say that belt of London and just outside actually has the highest human capital in the world. So just to say something positive, there hasn't been much positivity, but that's what they say. But the problem is we're so imbalanced, and that's why we tried to build the high-speed rail, the HS2, because you look at, I'm not being funny, but who in their right mind would want to live in Bolton? Nobody's going to want to go. Young people aren't going to want to go there. Educated people aren't going to. The problem is once you start that spiral, it's just, I call it.
How do you get out of that nosedive for that?
Exactly, and I don't mean to sound rude or anything, but in the north of the country, it's like this is how like the Muslims go there, and then after that, that's the final stranglehold. That's the final nail in the coffin. There's no growth. There's no capitalism. There's no innovation. Like who's gonna who's gonna go there? Nobody's going to want to go there. The problem is once the problem starts, because all the brain drain, all the human capital, all the young people, the educated ones, they're just going to leave. They're either going to go to Manchester at best. But to be honest, I don't want to get anecdotal, but even some of the other tier 1 cities don't really compare to London on any scale. Admittedly, I haven't been up and down the country for a while because our transport infrastructure is so poor, it's difficult to do. But it really is a massive difference. You go to Japan, China, South Korea, they've got so many different, like the United States, so many different centers of commerce and whatnot. I know there's a few Australians in the chat. It seems that way with Australia as well, but it's really bad in the UK. London, I think, is the only city that has a subway system as well. And it's, the problem is once the deprivation and the poverty starts, it's really difficult to break that cycle. But that's just one of many. So I think we've covered most of the main push and pull, most of the factors, the push and pull factors.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really good. Thank you for that overview. And I really didn't understand how bad it was. I thought maybe things weren't going that well in the UK, but this is pretty rough. And it's unclear to me how what I didn't see in any of your charts was a sign of things going in a better direction in the last year or two or something like that. If anything, some of them like that payment on the debt was just skyrocketing recently, right? Now they've raised interest rate. Well, no, that would make that bad. Anyway, yeah. So I would love to I like to be optimistic and tell a hopeful story. And maybe you'll find something as you keep digging.
Yeah, the second half of the title is few solutions because there's few solutions. Look, okay, so we've got more investment in vaccines. I don't know if that's a good thing, to be honest with you, but anyway, we've got that. We've got AI as well, which is up and coming in the UK. I think it's Republic of Korea. They signed a £23 billion investment deal. There are smidgens of it, but at some point, people have got to get real. You see, the UK has been kicking the can down the road. You see, there's different types of investment and growth. You can traditional, conventional growth, Radib, as we all know, it's like niche markets, innovation, new industries, new products. But the UK doesn't do that. What the UK does is say, oh, we'll just take another 10,000 Chinese students, have them pay fees 4 or 5 times the price, and we'll grow GDP that way. We'll just get more immigrants, and they can work in the gig economy for half the minimum wage. That doesn't work anymore. That's what they've been doing. They don't have any ideas. They don't invest. And if you don't invest, and you're up against these tiger Asian nations and things, and they're invested. I just finished a really good book. I know I mentioned it to you, The Making of Global Capitalism, by 2 Canadian authors. Bit technical. It's about the political economy of the American empire. And, America stayed on top of the game, not just because the dollar and its position as a global reserve currency. They were way ahead in R&D, technology. You see, America got their butts kicked in the 50s during the Eisenhower-Kennedy thing, where you didn't invest in capital machinery. Then the West Germans and the Japanese, they kind of, maintained parity. Then they overtook you and things like that. So America learned. This is why our software and a lot of our products a lot of them are American made, because they design them first. Research design them first. But the UK, we always seem to take the easy way out. You know what I mean? Oh, we'll just borrow. We'll just inflate away our problems. Oh, you can't do that anymore. You can't do that. You can't go run into the Bank of England. You can't go. We're just coming back to the utilities of privatization. We only do one type of investment, and excellent, brilliant book. All we do, Radlib, is we sell off the whole asset to the Chinese, the Indians, the Russians, the Americans. Whoever's got the surplus, Radlib, they can come. London's the place to be if you're rich. If you're in the global 1%, you come to London for investment. We've got special visas. We take care of those people really well. But the problem is your average man and woman on the street, not to say nothing of your average family, they're all struggling. So it's funny to me. We have this system. I do believe in capitalism, but I don't believe in cronyism. And I don't believe in, this system, like you said. I love that line you said from a few weeks back, tied to debt. The dollar is tied to debt. We're all in debt, and it seems to me that at a visceral level, all of this, the engine has run out. We're not having babies. We've got all this decline. You see the videos, on our timelines and things. And we've seen this before. We've seen the destitution after the Great Depression. We've seen Weimar Germany. And this is why I focus. I was on with Lambda on Tuesday or Monday. I can't remember this week. And, I mentioned it, the thing is with the economy, culture's great, history, whatever, but you can tell so much about, about the world through looking at the economic cycles. And we know, we've studied all of this. It was the same thing in Latin America in the 80s. And, we haven't recovered from 2008. No major industrial economy has lowered their debt to GDP ratio in Western Europe, the Eurozone, the UK, the US. It's just gone up and up and up. And I don't know, man, maybe it's true Spenglerian, whatever, the cyclical thing. Right. Maybe there's no way of halting the decline. But I think
to put it this way, we could say, are the current elites capable of making the kind of changes that would be required to come out of this nosedive?
Well, you know what?
And I don't see it myself. I see a lot of.
I don't see it because I don't see it either, because we're drunk off our own privilege and opulence and bourgeois kind of decadence. One thing that's interesting about the UK, everything around me, Radlib, everything in my fridge when I finish our stream comes from somewhere else. We import everything. What's that cliche? We don't consume what we produce, and we don't produce what we consume. It's that kind of thing. I think that's less a case in your country, because your productive capacity compared to us, I know a lot of it's gone to Mexico, it's gone to China, but it's compared to us, it's still very good. But it's just another Japanese car maker announced that 3,000 jobs leaving the UK. I don't know where this. I don't think they can. I don't think the people can, because all the people know are privileges and luxuries, and it's we know from history that people prefer borrowing, living beyond their means and spending, as opposed to living within their means, paying down their debt, and being fiscally responsible. And the same thing's true of our governments. Same thing's true of the governments. As part, I mean,
seems to be no discipline on them. I'm going to have to wrap it up. I've got a family event to get to.
Okay.
Thank you very much. People in the comments are reflecting on, those who are older, remembering how London used to be and stuff like that. I will mention I'm old enough that I've gotten to see a little bit before and after, because I have traveled to the UK about half a dozen times over the years, maybe more. My first time was actually in 1987.
Oh, really?
While the Soviet Union was still around during the Cold War. So I do actually have some ability to compare, just from my own perspective of having visited England. What is that? Going on 40 years ago.
I mean,
and there's been some changes, right? So
the cultural, social, political, economic transformation is it just doesn't feel like home. A lot of people ask me and things, why are you always abroad? Why do you travel? Some people get it, some don't. And I'm just like, well, it feels like my home's gone anyway, to be honest with you. But I don't know. Maybe it's just
that's
grumpy conservatives.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Very good work. Look forward to seeing that second article come out, and I will promote that on my Twitter account. Please follow Dissident Nomad. He doesn't put out like an article every day, but when he does put something out, it's usually quite meaty, like what we've seen today. So really worth keeping an eye on his Substack and on his Twitter account, because does everything you write come out on your Substack, or does some of it come out only on other sites like Praxarchy?
I mean, a mixture of Praxarchy and Substack, but everything's
but if we follow you on Twitter, you'll share wherever it's being published. You'll share the articles you're getting out there. So, right. So recommend Nomad as a very important follow on Twitter. All right, thanks everybody. What's going to come next? I don't know. Eventually, Black Horse will be back from paternity leave. He has a wonderful new baby. I got to see a picture, and next week will either be him or Ryan. I don't know. We'll see who's available. And eventually we'll get a Christmas break here, and we have the art contest, and we'll have a judging of the art submissions. Usually Christmas week, between Christmas and New Year's is when we usually do that. So anyway, wrapping up 2023, and thanks very much, Nomad. Yeah, as people are saying, thanks, but boy, was that depressing. Well, we try to be real, right? Even if it's not fun. So, okay, thanks everybody. Talk to you later.